Welcome aboard the podcast, A Woman Spark with Janik, a place to feel seen and understood for women around the world, a place where people can feel united and strong together as women should be. Today, we have Be Guided, Be Inspired blog guest, Faith Kamau. Today, this special guest is our very, very first guest on our blog entries, and she wrote a magnificent text. She shared her vision of what she wants for women. She's a beautiful soul. Please welcome her, Faith Kamau from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome, Faith. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Faith. How are you?
I'm a little nervous. It's my first time doing something like this. I'm mostly a writer. I'm never on the screen. So yeah, um, this is new.
It's always daunting to come in front of a screen, and it's especially even more daunting because you're bearing your soul raw with something you wrote that is really genuinely, I feel, coming from your soul. So I want to open the floor to you to read us the beautiful text you put together. So please welcome Faith Kamau from Nairobi, Kenya, and her beautiful text, Women in Power. Here's the floor to you, Faith.
Thank you so much. Here we go. Women in Power. Growing up in Nairobi, my dad loved watching international news channels, and at the ripe old age of 3, I was reasonably put out, and thus began my first hate watch, Richard Quest on CNN. I was too young to understand why the goings-on of the rest of the world mattered to my accountant father, and to be honest, sometimes I still don't. But watching international news outlets did bring me one piece of clarity. It introduced me to women in power. Imagine you're 5 years old and the only other source of entertainment available to you, except for your toys, is the telly. But the telly is always full of grumpy old men in dark suits, looking important and saying all these big words that go right over your head. Somehow, there are always men on the telly, but very few women. It starts to bother your little 5-year-old brain until you latch on to Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor. I, of course, didn't know who Angela was at 5 years of age, but I was instantly transfixed. Who was this lone woman in all the important news broadcasts and pictures, the kind they would air on national news channels as well as when something big was happening in Europe? Whoever she was, I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. Unfortunately for 5-year-old me, I am sad to report that 20-odd years later, we are still not German citizens, and I don't think they'd allow foreigners to run for or hold public office. But some things did change in those 20-odd years. More women started popping up in these news broadcasts. More and more women got elected into leadership, and I, a loyal viewer, also grew up and came to the realization I'm not doing enough. According to the Council on Foreign Relations Women's Power Index, only 26 out of 193 countries currently have a female head of state, and as you examine cabinets in these countries, the disparity only grows. The verdict, even though there has been an increase in the number of women in power, that increase is still incomparable to that of their male counterparts. And now, with the rise of fascist-leaning politics around the world, what little growth we had is now stalling. 2024 was a landmark election year globally, with 74 countries going to the ballot, and of all of those countries voting, only 3 elected a female candidate. Of the 13 UN member states currently being led by a woman, 9 of them are the first women ever elected into office. What's worse, only 60 out of the 193 UN member states have ever had a woman as the head of state. For a group of people who make up 51% of the global population, why haven't women had equal opportunity to lead their countries? For most voters, women are still viewed as incompetent leaders incapable of handling the requirements of the job of head of state. The reasons for that are mostly sexist, but you also wouldn't be wrong if you pointed out that many of them don't run for public office to begin with. Take the 2024 US presidential election. Only 4 women sought out nominations for presidency, and only 1 woman was successful, Kamala Harris. And despite all that, she still wasn't able to clinch victory from Donald Trump. Far too often, women tend to take themselves out of the running by almost never seeking office, or face systemic barriers that hold them back in spite of their desire to run for office, from lack of support within their political parties of choice to being unable to raise the money necessary to register themselves as candidates in some countries. Women's desires for leadership are constantly cut off before they have the chance to take off. Far too often, when women finally attain candidacy, it's usually to find themselves running against strong candidates who they stand little chance against, as was revealed by researchers in the University of Edinburgh. They revealed that female members of the Conservative Party in the UK more often ran for historically hard to win seats as compared to their male counterparts, a symptom of a glass cliff theory. Glass cliff theory claims that women are more likely to break through the glass ceiling in troubled times. Businesses are more likely to employ female and, by extension, other minority leaderships in times of crisis. As such, women in these positions are set up for failure from the outset. For most of the women the study focused on, with the benefit of hindsight, you can see that they had been handed impossible situations and very short time frames to enact change. So, are women actually bad at the job? Is that why it's so difficult to get a woman into public office? Yes and no. I know that's not exactly a ringing endorsement after my speech up there, but I believe it's important to be circumspect about women in power, and that requires some honesty. Women, just like men, are susceptible to falling prey to abuse of power. We've seen it in Bangladesh and more recently in Tanzania, and these won't be the last instances of abuse of power from any political leader, man or woman. As long as we're unable to view both male and female candidates without a gender bias, female candidates will always be competing in a race with far much higher stakes. Questions about her choice of clothing, her running for office while unmarried, or deciding to have a child while in office are things that female candidates' male counterparts never have to contend with. Part of the problem has always been how female candidates are packaged to us by the media. When women are more sensitive to media criticism, and if they seem impervious to it, they are often perceived as difficult, which then hurts their chances of being elected. Women are constantly in a damned if they do, damned if they don't cage when it comes to leadership, but hiding away is far from the solution. Part of the conclusions of glass cliff theory show that once people have warmed up to the idea of women in leadership, some of the biases exhibited early on in the study simply cease to factor into decision making. The solution is to simply keep fighting for women's candidacy, whether that is by demanding there be quotas for female representation in government or holding the media accountable when they take on sexist criticisms against women candidates. The face of democracy needs to represent more than just men in power. There's a young girl who watched New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern's prime ministership in awe, another one who hated to see former US Vice President Kamala Harris lose, and countless others who stood up to Bangladesh's Sheikh Hasina. I grew up wanting to see women in power. With my vote, I can make that happen, and so can you. You know a woman who could do a lot of good if only she put herself out there? Now's the time to get her campaign rolling. And if you're reading this and wondering who would come out to vote if you ran, well, I would, and countless others. The glass cliff only exists if we let it. So don't.
Thank you so much, Faith, for this magnificent text. I really, 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 it's heartfelt. And you know what? I think you're writing what many, many, if not most women are thinking. And I especially like the last part where you say that, you know, we do have a power. Even if we feel
Yeah.
powerless or very trivial and small, we do have power, and our right to vote and our right to raise a voice is what we have as a power. So Thank you for this empowering text. I really appreciate it, Faith.
Thank you. Yes.
May I ask what inspired you to write this text? Because on this podcast, we call it a woman's spark, because every woman has a spark. What was your spark to write this text?
In the introduction, I talk about Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, and I'm a big fan. I'm such a huge fan of Angela Merkel. Seeing her on screen, especially at a time, like I said, when there weren't a lot of women on screen, especially with, news broadcasts. So it was always just the men. They're big and they're important, So seeing her and then realizing there's not a lot of women there actually. I don't think I would run for public office. I mean, I'm not sure. Life throws you lots of curveballs, but yeah.
I feel like anything is possible, but keep going.
Yeah. So I wrote this maybe for me, but also for so many other young women who I think don't run for public office because they think no one will vote. I come from a country where predominantly the people that do the running are the men. We've had very few female candidates for presidency. More often than not, they latch themselves onto a popular male candidate as like a vice president, which is actually surprisingly quite common, even in the West, where it seems like, feminism it's not just a thing people throw around, it's a lived reality. And
it is a lived reality. It is something that us women live every day. There are a lot of white noise around the difference between a man and a woman that are not seen, that we live as women, and that men we would say take for granted because they don't see it, because they don't live it. So men can't really fully understand what it's like to be a woman because, like you said in your text, they're not asked how they're dressed and what shoes they're wearing and their emotional outburst or, opinion that they have on whatever matter. So this is not, it's a white noise.
Yeah.
That is out
Which
there.
is crazy. Which is crazy because, like I said, 51% of the population, we literally outnumber them to some extent. And
that's totally true. So
still nothing.
Thank you very much again. Thank you very much once again, Faith. I really appreciate you coming, first of all, to write for writing on the blog and for coming on the podcast to read your text. And to all you women out there, this is Faith's first time on our podcast and blog, but obviously not our last. So feel free to look out for her. We're going to have more writers on here, more inspirational women, and Faith will be back with us. If you want to inspire other women, please write us on the Be Guided, Be Inspired community at www.beguidedbeinspired.com. Write us and we'll connect together. Let's change the world of women one conversation at a time. Keep sparkling, you beautiful women. See you next time. Bye.